right. I'm just looking at some context here. Hello. And you probably saw the brief that we put together. Do a brief overview of that. It's better than oh, how are you? You're doing good. Good to see you. That's it. All right, if we could, let's go ahead and reconvene the committee. And we'll start with our first presentation, and that is the Racing Sunset Review. So we're going to start with staff, or are we going to start with the committee? Or go ahead.
Madam Chair, yeah, I'll kick it off. Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Allison Nichols, and I'm the LFC analyst for the New Mexico Racing Commission. We're here today to review the upcoming sunset date for the Racing Commission. As you probably know, the Sunset Act requires the LFC to review certain agencies and commissions to either extend their sunset date or let them terminate. The Racing Commission is due to sunset on July 1st of this year, and if the legislature does not take any action, the commission would cease operations on July 1st of next year, and the Horse Racing Act would also be repealed at that time. If the LFC recommends to the legislature to extend the sunset date of the commission, the legislature would have to pass a bill during the next legislative session to do so. And as a reminder, I think some of you were there in January, the LFC held a preliminary sunset review hearing for the Racing Commission, but took no action at that time, indicating that they wanted more time to discuss some of the issues facing the industry and the commission. So at this time, LFC staff do recommend extending the sunset date of the commission for 5 years, and that recommendation is based on a couple things. It's based, first of all, on the recognition that as long as there is a racing industry in New Mexico, there needs to be a regulator, and obviously the hope is that it's an effective regulator. And then it's also based on progress that the commission's made in recent years in reducing racehorse fatalities and increasing drug testing to identify violators, and also strengthening penalties by bringing the commission in line with national standards. However, we should note that there are still some serious issues facing the industry and the agency. For example, 112 horses died as a result of racing in the last 3 years, and racehorse fatality rates are still higher than the national average. I'm going to briefly review the Commission's performance and some key issues facing the industry, and you should have in front of you a brief in tab H, and I'll be referring to that. The Racing Commission regulates the racehorse industry in New Mexico and oversees racing at 5 racetracks, plus a state fair. And all racetracks also have a casino operating alongside them. The Commission licenses industry participants like jockeys, grooms, veterinarians, vendors, etc. There are approximately 70 license types, and you can see a full list in Appendix B of the brief, along with licensing fees. The agency's general fund appropriation for FY22 was $2.34 million, and that's in addition to revenues from the Racehorse Testing Fund and some industry revenues as well. And both general fund and total appropriations have grown over the last few years, and you can see that in the chart on the left side of page 2. The racing industry relies heavily on casino revenues. 20% of the net win from casinos goes to fund racing purses or prizes for races. The commission itself consists of 5 commissioners who are appointed by the governor. There's currently 1 vacant position that's been vacant since December of last year. And the new chair, Mr. Sam Bregman, beside me, was appointed in February. Statute doesn't require that the commission have any public members. However, we do think it is best practice for boards and commissions to have as close to 1/3 public members as possible. So we do think the commission could benefit from having some true public members who are not directly involved in the racing industry. So briefly touching on one of the key issues in the industry, which is racehorse fatalities and illegal drug use. The industry in general, not just in New Mexico, has struggled with high rates of racehorse fatalities, also called catastrophic injuries. And New Mexico specifically has struggled with this issue. For example, in 2012, the state had 5 of the 7 tracks with the highest fatality rates in the country. And rates have fallen considerably since then. So in 2013, there were 3.5 catastrophic injuries per 1,000 starts. And that fell to 1.46 in 2019, and then rose last year to 2.11. And by comparison, the national average last year was 1.41 per 1,000 starts. And as I mentioned, that translates to 112 racehorse deaths between 2018 and 2020. Illegal and improper drug use, drugs administered to racehorses, is a significant contributor to racehorse deaths. The Racing Commission tests blood, urine, and hair samples from horses after racing and also outside of competitions. And that testing is funded through the Racehorse Testing Fund, which receives 50% of a tax on racing licensees. The Commission's increased its post-race testing in the past few years, although testing did decrease in 2020, and that was mostly due to decreased racing activity as a result of COVID-19. Positivity rates have fallen while testing's increased, meaning that the Commission has gotten better at identifying violators. Out-of-competition testing has also increased, but the positivity rates for that type of testing have remained high. For example, hair sample testing, which accounts for about 90% of out-of-competition testing, has a positivity rate of 7%. So that really suggests a need for more of that type of testing to be able to identify violators. And you can see a summary of testing volumes and positivity rates on page 5. The agency has indicated that having more veterinarians on staff could help in identifying illegal drug use by examining more horses before racing, and the Commission currently has 1 staff veterinarian. The recommended penalties for drug use are based on the Association of Racing Commissioners International, and that's or international model rules of racing, and that's the national standard for the industry. And the Racing Commission recently adopted the latest ARCI guidelines, and that has strengthened penalties somewhat, although in general, trainers face stricter penalties than owners, and veterinarians typically don't face penalties, so that is a potential gap in sanctioning violators. Standards and enforcement of illegal drug use in the industry are likely going to change, probably getting stricter soon with the passage of a federal law, the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act, and that creates a national independent anti-doping authority. States will likely be required to, states and or racing participants will likely be required to pay more fees to support this national authority, but the federal government has not yet communicated costs to states. So the Racing Commission can probably speak a little bit more about the potential implications of that new federal law. One issue that we've discussed in the past is illegal track activity, or so-called bush tracks. That continues to be an issue, although it's hard to know what the scope of the problem is, as it's obviously concealed. The Commission does not have law enforcement capacity, so they have to rely on state police and other law enforcement to deal with that, and should make sure that they're working closely with law enforcement to address that illegal track activity. Another issue that has come up in the past is penalty fee collection. The agency really struggles to collect penalty fees. That's fees assessed on violators. For example, in the agency's 2019 audit, it was found that of the 1 million in fines receivable, nearly all of those fines were classified as uncollectible. And that's due to a few reasons. Violators often appeal their sanctions and enter into really long, drawn-out appeals processes, and the fines are tied up in court. Some violators also cannot or claim they cannot pay their fines. So the commission, as a result, has a pretty low success rate in collecting the fines. However, the commission does note that even if the fines aren't collected, they can still be effective in keeping violators out of the industry. For example, a 2019 rule says that a horse involved in a drug violation can't race in other jurisdictions in the U.S., so that should hopefully make it less attractive for violators to appeal fines and draw out these processes for months or years. And the commission has also recently hired an attorney and is exploring ways to impose liens on property or taxes for delinquent licensees. So again, LFC staff does recommend at this point that the Racing Commission's sunset date be extended by 5 years to July 1st, 2026, but also suggests that the LFC consider requiring as part of the bill that the commission make meaningful progress in collecting penalty fees and enforcing sanctions on violators, and also potentially requiring that the commission have at least one public member. So with that, I'll stop. I'm available for questions, and I'll turn it over to the Racing Commission. Thank you.
Why don't we go through the whole panel, then we come back for questions. So go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Madam Chair, thank you. And it's great to be here in Ruidoso talking horse racing. This is, after all, the home of the richest quarter horse race in the world, the All-American Futurity. And I know that, I hope that some of you get a chance, if you're staying over tonight, to go out to the races tomorrow. It is certainly a wonderful, wonderful event and wonderful time. In February, the governor gave me the honor and appointed me to the commission. And it has been truly a joy these last few months to get to know the industry as I have. The commission is made up of some people with some amazing knowledge and experience and understanding of the industry. And I just want to mention, I know that Commissioner Billy Smith is here. We have a great vice chair, and Hasi Sanchez, and Commissioner John Buffington as well is also on the commission. They understand the industry, and the state is blessed to have them giving their time as they do for this industry. I also want to point out that over the last 4 months, I've gotten the opportunity to work hand in hand with the executive director, Mr. Trejo, and the staff of the Racing Commission. And I can tell you, I've been in a lot of businesses in my life, and I am thoroughly impressed with their abilities, their focus, and their hard work. And I just want you all to know that every day they get up and they try and make this industry better for all of us here in New Mexico. I also want to point out that the Racing Commission, as this committee knows, works hand in hand on a lot of things with the Gaming Control Board. Gaming Control Board is represented today, and I'm very grateful of his appearance. He's here to answer any questions that you may have as they relate to the Gaming Control Board, because the statutes, as you know, interact often. And that's Jeremy Romero, who's here. He's the chairman of the Gaming Control Board as well. And I appreciate Mr. Chairman Romero being here. The last year has been challenging for everybody in any business in New Mexico, and certainly for the people in each and every one of us of New Mexico, I think. And we've had a lot of challenges, and the New Mexico racing industry is not one that hasn't had its challenges as well. We didn't get as much racing as we wanted to get done last year, obviously with the pandemic and everything that's associated with that. But I'm happy to report to you all now that horse racing is up and running, and running well, if you will. Purses are up substantially. In fact, I know that Sunray up in Farmington had 4 purse increases. That's really substantial. In other words, that's the winnings that the horses are running for, and that is extremely important because we want to continue to attract the best horses we can and have the best competition out there for the betting public as well. And I know Ruidoso has already raised their purse structure once and may do so in the near future again. Speaking of Ruidoso's pari-mutuel handling is up over 50% already from 19. And that is a sign of the health of the industry, I think, coming back and showing some real strength in the fact that people are coming out and wagering on it. Obviously, we had some setbacks with the Kentucky Derby and a positive test, and that put a black eye on the entire industry. And I want to address that in a little bit. But I will say that overall, I believe people are coming back in strong numbers to the meets and are enjoying themselves quite a bit for great horse racing here in New Mexico. Simulcasting is also up. The simulcast take is also up at all the racetracks as well. The racing industry has a huge impact on New Mexico's economy, and I want to make sure that we understand how big this industry is and of importance to the state. In 2018, the UNM Department of Economics did a report on the economic impact of the horse racing industry in New Mexico. That study came to the conclusion of what I'm just going to highlight two important numbers, I think. One is that horse racing directly contributed to $549 million to New Mexico economic output. The industry also supports over 8,000 jobs. Those are big numbers. This is not to say that the industry doesn't have its challenges. And as was mentioned earlier, there are things that I, as fortunate enough to be chairman, and I know the rest of the commission are really focusing in like a laser beam on, and that's robust testing, because we have the magnificent athletes, these horses that are incredible. And we have the jockeys that ride them that are incredible athletes as well. And their safety has to be of paramount importance to us. And so the best way to address that I've learned so far is a truly robust testing program to make sure that, unfortunately, the very few, but nonetheless a few of them, who decide that they want to drug a horse illegally and cheat are caught, and they're banned from doing it again. Yeah. They're banned from the industry. That's the goal, is to continue to increase testing so that we have less fatalities of horses on the racetrack. I think so far, knock on wood, we've had a pretty good year in this year right now so far when it comes to fatalities, and I'll let the executive director address that. But testing is extremely important, and it's on the top of our radar as far as the industry is concerned, not just locally but nationally as well. And I know that we have a new law at the federal side, and I know that the director will address that as well. That is going to be, I think, a big focus of this commission going forward, is making sure that this is not only fair to the athletes, but fair to the public that comes and the public that bets on horses. It is my belief, and I'm going to be brief here, and I really look forward to standing for any questions that you all have. It's my belief that New Mexico, because of what's going on in other states when it comes to the industry, who do not have the same kind of support, quite frankly, that we have from the state, we're primed in a position to really take it to another level, I think. And I'm excited about that. I know Tom with the breeders is here. And I know that the racetracks, many of them are represented here as well. And I'm sure they could answer questions if you have some for them. I think together, meaning the horsemen, the breeders, and the racetracks, and just as importantly, their regulator, the New Mexico Racing Commission, working hand in hand, not only can we get this industry better than it has been, but we can make it a real gem when it comes to horse racing in this country, and I'm looking forward to helping that move along. And I'm more than willing, obviously, to stand for any questions and talk more specifics if you need to. But I'll turn it over to Mr. Trejo, the Executive Director, now. Thank you.
All righty, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. If I didn't know any better, I'd almost say these guys plagiarized my speech. So pardon the redundancy that might be coming to you. My name's Ismael Trejo, known in most circles just as Izzy, Executive Director of the New Mexico Racing Commission since March 26, 2016. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present before you today. Before I start, I do want to acknowledge, as Commissioner Bregman did, Commissioner Smith is here, but also I want to introduce the small army of people behind me that make up the New Mexico Racing Commission staff. This bunch of people regulates the industry in a very professional, blue-collar way. We're not a big staff, but we succeed because we just work hard. That's our matter of survival, is just to work hard, and that's what these people do day in and day out to regulate this very important industry to the state of New Mexico. And I'll go even step out further that they're the best crew that I've ever worked with in my professional career as a regulator, and that's from coast to coast. So let's start out with some basics on the commission. The commission operates 6 separate activities: 1, equine drug testing; 2, investigations and enforcement; licensing, auditing, and financial accounting; race meet oversight, as well as administration and support. The cornerstone of our regulation is drug testing, as Mr. Chairman said. That ties in with our focus of enhancing the welfare of the equine athlete, a significant concern of John Q. Public. I'm happy to say the agency has made great strides in protecting the horse through its drug testing programs, as well as helping the perception of the sport with the same drug testing programs. The bottom line is, if the game is rigged, people will not place their bets with their hard-earned money. It's simple. I would not expect anyone in this room to play a rigged roulette game or a blackjack table game. So the same holds true for horse racing. We need to assure that it's an honest game to survive. The agency has always conducted post-race testing. That is required by rule. Over the last few years, and you could look at the handout that we left for everyone, that the agency's focus is becoming more and more on out-of-competition testing. In 2016, the New Mexico Racing Commission implemented a strong program to increase out-of-competition testing, which includes the testing of a horse's hair down to its follicle. Since the inception of the out-of-competition testing initiative in April of 2016, the trend indicates a significant decline in post-race drug violations. A large reason for the decreases is, in our opinion, obviously due to the out-of-competition testing program. The Commission's out-of-competition testing program has increased the number of samples analyzed from 309 samples in 2017 to 508 in 2018, 819 in 2019, and 754 in 2020, with the goal of trending towards 1,000 or more samples analyzed per year if funding permits. And the 2020 numbers were obviously down because of the closures of some of the racetracks and cancellation of race meets due to the pandemic and the lack of funds in the Equine Test Fund. But the good news is, in the time span between 2017 and 2019, the number of post-race drug analysis conducted by the agency's official laboratory increased by over 124%. That was due to better pricing when we switched labs from a laboratory in California to one in Colorado. They gave us a better pricing model. During that same time period, the percentage of medication violations decreased over 71%. In 2017, 3.5% of our total samples, post-race samples tested, were violations. In 2020, that number decreased to 0.865%. That's over 75% decrease in post-race violations. Obviously, the pandemic slowed testing in 2020 due to the closure of racing facilities, but despite that, we still did more testing for post-race in 2020 than we did in 2017 in its entirety. Actually, the agency's been asked to speak several times at different industry conferences throughout the country. People like that the New Mexico Racing Commission has changed course for the state of New Mexico from a jurisdiction that was once renowned for widespread cheating to one that has become a leader in the implementation of innovative testing programs. The agency was recently acknowledged by the Association of Racing Commissioners International, the umbrella regulatory organization of North American regulators, with an award for the exemplary service to the integrity of horse racing. All the efforts of attacking drug abuse in horses are for obvious reasons. First, it improves the welfare of the equine athlete. Our catastrophic breakdown rate in 2019 was the lowest in several previous years. Secondly, the decrease in medication violations has a positive influence on the New Mexico racing industry's image on a national level, which results in increased pari-mutuel handle. All 5 racetracks in New Mexico had seen increases in average bet per race prior to the pandemic shutting us down in March of 2020. Third, less drug or medication violations means less appeals to hearing officers or district court. A decrease in appeals has led to a direct effect on the agency's budget. At one point in 2016 and 17, we had contracted with 5 hearing officers. Now, because of the significant decrease in appeals, we only contract with 1, and he doesn't have that much work to do all the time. He might disagree with that. But as the industry begins its recovery from the pandemic, it appears to be all moving in the right direction. Gaming numbers have been favorable due to a favorable gaming landscape at the moment. Some tribes have taken a little longer to open up their casinos, so we're going to take advantage of that. The pari-mutuel numbers, as Mr. Chairman mentioned, which is money wagered on our races, is up significantly. We could have not asked for a better start from the starting gate. And we're glad we're experiencing this little renaissance for racing. At the most recently concluded Sunray Park race meet, pari-mutuel handle was up over 123%, and the most impressive point on that number is it was done in 18 days of racing versus their traditional 34 days of racing. So basically they bet more in 18 days ever at Sunray Park in Farmington than they used to in 34 days of racing. So that's a pretty significant increase, and we're very happy that was our first race meet coming out of the pandemic to show strong numbers just like that. And it is nothing short of spectacular. And as Mr. Chairman said, numbers are strong at the current Ruidoso meet here. Numbers are up 50% in pari-mutuel handle. So needless to say, pari-mutuel handle is the ultimate barometer of the health of the industry. If people don't care about horse racing, they're not going to bet on it. So these strong numbers are indicative that people have interest in our industry here in New Mexico and our racing product. On another note, I'm happy to report that there was not one catastrophic breakdown at the 2021 Sunray Park race meet. Not one horse lost his life to horse racing there this year in the 18 days of racing. And currently at Ruidoso, out of over 1,100 performances by horses, we have lost 1. So we're looking to continue this momentum throughout the calendar year, bring back to you in years to come a very, very low catastrophic injury rate for this year. But does that all mean things are fine in Pleasantville? No, it's not. There are impending obstacles for the industry in regards to regulation and the ability to compete in the market. New Mexico still does not allow New Mexicans to bet on New Mexico races from their mobile devices. They are allowed to bet on races in New York, California, and all points in between. And that's, in my mind, kind of equivalent to living in Bernalillo County and not being able to grocery shop there and having to go to Eddy or Lee County to grocery shop. I mean, it's almost nonsense that New Mexicans can't bet on their own home racetracks. They're big racing fans. They like to bet on the jockeys and the trainers that are here in New Mexico. We think they should be allowed to, but that's a conversation for the next legislation. Another obstacle that impairs our objective of improving the welfare of the racehorse is the fact that the agency does not employ enough veterinarians to efficiently execute new programs that would be conducive to the well-being of the equine athlete. The agency has petitioned for additional funding to add veterinarians to its staff to help with the implementation of new programs that would benefit the horse, such as requiring that all horses that are entered to race be pre-race inspected by an official veterinarian. Currently, the agency inspects between 12 and 24 horses each race day of the 80 to 120 horses that are entered to run. That falls significantly short of the industry best practice of pre-race examining 100% of the horses that are entered to run. We owe it to the horse. It's very simple. The agency also wants to implement a drug testing program during training hours to assure that horses are not being pushed to train for races while under the influence of pain-masking drugs. The agency also wants to employ veterinarians that are versed in the utilization of technology to track horses' infirmities by creating and inputting data to magnify any downward trends in a horse's physical condition. So that's pretty important that we continue our focus on the racehorse. The next obstacle, and this is an interesting one, and Ms. Nichols and Chairman Bregman touched on it, the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act. It was passed in December 2020 by outgoing President Donald Trump. This is a federal law that will significantly impact not only horse racing across the country, but more importantly, New Mexico's horse racing regulatory agency, us. This federal law is scheduled to go into effect on July 1st, 2022, although two jurisdictions, Oklahoma and West Virginia, filed a lawsuit seeking an injunction to stop the rollout of this new federal legislation. The HIS, as we call it, will allow the federal government to take over the regulating of thoroughbred racing as it relates to drug testing, drug violation investigations, medication rulemaking, and prosecution of drug violations. All racing jurisdictions will be permitted to opt in the quarter horse breed to be regulated by the feds as well. A major component of this law will require each racing jurisdiction to pay for their part of conducting horse racing under this act. At this time, the cost of the new federal program has not been divulged to the industry. Furthermore, the prospect of two different regulatory entities regulating horse racing in New Mexico will potentially create difficulties due to the fact that New Mexico's racetrack runs both breeds on any given day and for any given race for that matter. So I'd hate to see a quarter horse thoroughbred race mixed together, and some horses are under the federal laws, some horses are under the quarter horses, or New Mexico's laws, I'm sorry. And finally, the topic that has been discussed quite a bit is the bush tracks in New Mexico. Let me be clear, though, that it's not illegal to race a horse against another horse on your private property. That's not what we're concerned about, necessarily. That being said, bush tracks or illegal racing, as some like to call it, continues to have a negative impact on our racing product. The culture of lawlessness spills into our sanctioned racing and causes issues for the New Mexico Racing Commission in respects to drug violations and other rules of racing violations. At the conclusion of the 2016 Zia Park race meet in Hobbs, New Mexico, the New Mexico Racing Commission found itself dealing with 50 drug violations from only 56 days of racing. Of course, the math is pretty simple. That's almost one drug violation per day. That was in the past. That was before we really took an initiative, an attack on the drug problem here in New Mexico. But the reason for that we thought we had such a high volume of violations there was because Zia Park sits on the eastern side of New Mexico, close to West Texas. West Texas is a hotbed for illegal bush track racing. We don't infiltrate, obviously, it's across state lines. So it is the position of the New Mexico Racing Commission that these participants in these illegal unsanctioned races create problems for New Mexico horse racing by not adhering to our rules. In a 2016 compliance detail conducted by one of our enforcement teams, 3 guns were found coming onto the racetrack by licensees. Also found during the same detail were illegal drugs. In a review of the Horse Racing Act, it appears that the NMRC may have jurisdiction over the unsanctioned racing on a limited basis, mind you. The agency will work with local law enforcement agencies to curtail the abuse to the horse that traditionally takes place at these unsanctioned events. The participants at bush tracks are essentially amateurs. They are out there endangering themselves and their own horses. The New Mexico Racing Commission has met with law enforcement agencies as we have been monitoring 3 unsanctioned racetracks in Valencia County for the last several months. In closing, those are probably everyone's favorite words to hear. In closing, the New Mexico Racing Commission considers it a privilege to regulate an industry that has such historical significance to the citizens of this state. The agency has taken a position that the welfare of the horse is paramount because it is a simple understanding that if we do not have the horses, we do not have an industry. The citizens of this great state can be assured that the New Mexico Racing Commission has their best interests at heart in assuring patrons who are wagering on the fairest product available in the United States. The agency will continue to strive to be progressive in its approach when regulating horse racing while keeping the best interests of the horse first and foremost. I stand for any questions, Madam Chair.
All righty, thank you very much. We do have a list for questions, but I need to ask a few things just for clarification. I need to have a little bit better clarification from the commission regarding this uncollected portion of fines. You all had touched a little bit on that, and what's the plan on that?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the Commission, as you may know or may not know, members of the committee. I'm used to talking to this guy. Anyways, by statute, we have to adopt the Association of Racing Commissioners International Fines Recommended Penalties, okay? Those fines are very significant. For Class A violations, they're upwards of $50,000. We have one guy, for example, the case is under appeal, so I won't name names. We got him for $480,000 worth of fines. His client, the owner of the horse, we got him for $300,000, maybe a few more dollars than that. Between the two of them, $700,000. That case is under appeal, but even if it wasn't under appeal, in horse racing, the majority of the people don't make any money. Only a small percentage make a significant living. It would be equivalent to finding someone that works at a fast food restaurant making $15 an hour, $10,000 for not finding or washing their hands. So it doesn't look good on paper. I acknowledge that we have some outstanding fines that have not been collected, but we're just following the law and sanctioning these people what the ARCI recommended penalties suggest we do.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you here. In our LFC staff recommendations under next steps, page 9, the second bullet says, as part of the Sunset Extension Bill, consider requiring the Commission to make progress toward improving collections of penalty fee revenue and enforcing sanctions.
Yes,
now,
Madam.
You know, this is a staff recommendation to us. We haven't voted yet to extend this sunset. So I want to know what you're going to do specifically to collect these fees.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm on my way there, members of the committee.
And
I have had conversations with our new in-house counsel, Richard Bustamante. It's one of the subjects that we touched on first. He's been with the agency for a couple months. As mentioned, we're focusing on liens against property and the animals themselves to try to collect this money. We just haven't had the legal expertise on our staff to really look at a good avenue of collecting these fines. But we've heard it from the auditors, and it's certainly going to be one of the focuses of the next fiscal year.
All right, so when we have you in front of us for budget, you're going to be able to show me what the plan is, what the different components are in terms of how you plan to collect these fees.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I can assure you we will have that.
All right. The other question I have here, because I'm going back and forth to what our staff brief says versus what you've just said. Non-compliance with statutes. Is that an issue for the commission?
In general, yes, it is an issue. I don't know if we're speaking to one specifically, but since I've been on the commission, I know it's been an emphasis as far as the commission is concerned to make sure that everybody is following the law and the statutes are in fact followed to the letter of the law. That's extremely important to me. It's extremely important to the other commissioners as well. I have a little bit of background, as some of you may know, in the law, and I'm focused in on that. And I want to make sure that every stakeholder that we regulate is following the law.
Will we be expecting then, Mr. Bregman, some recommendations for statute change? So I don't know when these went into effect. I'm not involved directly with horse racing. You know, we look at budgets of agencies and do they make sense? But when we see audit compliance issues more than 2 years in a row, we're going to start asking questions about it. So tell me, do you think that may be something that'll come from your commission?
It may, some recommendations on statute change. I think we're still kind of getting our arms around some of the things. I know we've made some changes recently, and I know that some stakeholders have felt hurt by that, but nonetheless, we're going to follow the law as it's written. And I think one of the things, and I just recently put together the racetracks and the breeders, for example, in an attempt to get us together to figure out what we do need to push the ball forward, if you will, as the industry. And part of that, of course, and I know you all sometimes have seen this industry come up splintered on different issues, but my goal is to see us all come up together and make sure we're emphasizing the changes that'll make a positive impact all the way through. So I don't want to say I have something right now that I can tell you we're going to do, but I do believe when by the time the legislature is there, I mean, it hits, we're going to be ready to participate in if there needs to be some new statutes or requests for some new laws to ask you all to do it unified, hopefully, as an industry.
Yeah, that would be good, because I can tell you in the time I've been chair of HAFC since 2007, it's absolutely been splintered. I know. Different groups have stepped forward, different advocate groups or participants, stakeholders, whoever it happens to be. And there's been some pretty loud voices in that direction. But let's go to the rest of the committee for questions. Let's start with Representative Crowder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Can you hear me okay? Do I need to get this a little bit closer?
Thank you for doing that. I'm just bad on hearing.
No, it's all right. I don't mind. I'm going to ask most of my questions based on Allison's document and kind of launch from there, and then I want to circle back around to the letter that was just passed out from the Gaming Control Commission. I would like a little bit of an understanding on that letter in a minute. But as I read through Allison's presentation on page 7, where it talks about declining popularity of horse racing, I noticed that in here it says that the number of registered thoroughbred foals fell by almost 60% between 2010 and 2019. So there was a huge drop pre-pandemic. 60%, that's a huge drop. Then it had dropped an additional 20% during the pandemic. So as I looked at that decline, and then I looked at the new Federal Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act, that act only applies to thoroughbreds, which is what just dropped. So I began to wonder, in New Mexico, are most of our horse races quarter horse races? Or most of our horses quarter horses, or most of them thoroughbreds? And can you talk to me about those numbers a little bit so that I would know what to anticipate if the federal law goes into play and there's more regulation on thoroughbreds but not quarter horses? Can we anticipate there's going to be more mischief in the quarter horse arena? So can you speak to that a little bit, please?
Yes, Madam Chair, Representative Crowder, thank you for the question. It's a very good question. If you look at the national numbers, you're going to see the same trend that the thoroughbred breed has decreased significantly from the high points of the 80s and early 90s. It's down significantly across the entire country. In regards to the federal legislation, it's difficult to see how that's going to affect everyone. You know, we're making a lot of progress in the quarter horse industry here in New Mexico. And currently, if you had to give a percentage ratio on quarter horses versus thoroughbreds here in the state of New Mexico, it might be, give or take a few percentages, 60 to 65% to 35 to 40% thoroughbred racing here.
So the 65, Madam Chair, the 65% would be thoroughbreds? Would
be thoroughbred racing here.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm going to guess that we have a larger population of quarter horses in this state. that's just the way it's built. A lot of states race separate race meets just specifically for thoroughbreds and specifically for quarter horses. Not saying we're moving in that direction yet, but there's been some discussion on doing that so we could regulate the thoroughbreds all in one under the federal legislation and have the funding for that separate than having these mixed race meets where they both run on the same race day. But the quarter horses will have the opportunity to opt in, and that can be mandated by the New Mexico Racing Commission or the American Quarter Horse Association. Right now, as we speak, it doesn't look like the American Quarter Horse Racing Association cares to move that breed in under the federal legislation. So funding is going to be very difficult. There was an article put out the other day that the per test is going to increase to $2,900 versus what we pay right now, $130. So this federal legislation can be a game changer, and I'm fearful that it'll significantly impact the New Mexico horse racing industry in a very negative way as far as tightening business practices up and forcing us to run less thoroughbreds.
Okay, thank you for that answer. And that's what I think I hear you say is you're anticipating if the federal law does not withstand, if it withstands the appeal and goes into play, then thoroughbred racing will decline tremendously, probably in New Mexico, and quarter horse racing may increase, but overall there'll be a net decrease, I think is what I hear you say in horse racing.
Madam Chair, Representative Crowder, that's potentially can happen. I mean, I've been looking at this federal legislation for over 2 years now, and I've always called it kill the mid-level and lower-level racetrack jurisdiction bill, because I think it's going to make life pretty difficult and pretty expensive to regulate horse racing.
Okay. Well, and I'm trying to couch all this in my mind within the boundaries of sunset review. That's what the title of our agenda item is. This is a sunset review for the Racing Commission. So I'm trying to anticipate what may happen in your industry based on the information that's been provided to us. My second question is from the bottom of page 7. It talks about the New Mexico Racing Commission has not released an annual report since 2018. And I'm very curious, why not?
Yes, Madam Chair, Representative Crowder, members of the committee. Yes, the answer to that is at the very end of 2019, the agency lost a handful of staff members to retirement and relocation. The hiring process has been slow and painful. We finally got a CFO in charge, as we were without one for 6 months, and we finally got a purchasing agent done to do procurement and get contracts done. We hadn't had one for over 8 months. So we just finished one of the annual reports that will be produced here shortly, and we're waiting for the new fiscal year to contract to do the next annual report that we're behind on, and then we'll get back on track with this ending fiscal
Madam Chair and Ms. Trejo, I appreciate that comment. I would encourage you to go hire an accounting firm to come in and look at your books and help you fill out a report. We have to go by those reports to make decisions.
Yes.
And so I would encourage you to find a way to do that. If you lose staff under your leadership, you can contract with an accounting firm or someone to come in and do an audit and help you fill out a report. I would encourage that.
I appreciate that, Representative.
My final question is actually for Allison. Allison, on the bottom of page 8, you have a comment that while racetracks have traditionally made transfers to New Mexico Horsemen's Association, the Horse Racing Act does not appear to require these transfers. Was that a legal opinion? Was that your opinion, or what? Tell me about that statement, please.
Madam Chair, Representative Crowder, yeah, I don't want to get too into this lawsuit. I would let others talk about it. It's a recent lawsuit. I think an opinion from the Racing Commission was handed out. My reading of statute is that it is not required, but that is not a legal opinion, and I would rely on others to confirm.
That's all I was trying to
Thank you.
trying to understand. Am I reading a legal opinion, or is it a staff opinion? And just wanted to clarify. And I don't know who actually wrote this letter, but I would there's a bold paragraph right in the middle that says, you are hereby directed by the Gaming Control Board to cease any such practice of deducting any fees from the 20%. Is whoever wrote this in the room, and can they speak to what exactly does this paragraph say?
Madam Chair, Representative, this was sent out by Janice, and I'm going to butcher her last name, Mariachi, who's the executive director of the Gaming Control Board. I don't believe she's here. I know the chairman's here, but I think this is in direct reflection of I don't know if you saw the Racing Commission order that was attached to that.
I got a one-page, Madam Chair, I got a one-page document is all I have. And I know there's a gentleman behind you from the Gaming Control, I believe, from the Gaming Control Board.
Yeah, and I can explain.
I appreciate it. Would it be all right if the person from the Gaming Control Board, Madam Chair, would explain exactly what this letter means?
Why don't you come up here, sir? Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon.
Can I take a look at that? Or does he need to read it?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Board Chairman of the New Mexico Gaming Control Board, Jeremy Romero. In regards to the letter that was drafted and written and signed off by our newly appointed Executive Director, Janice Mariachi, she wasn't able to attend today. I can't really speak for the specifics of the letter, being that she was the one that drafted and wrote the letter, and she runs the day-to-day of the New Mexico Gaming Control Board. I do, however, upon reviewing the letter, do support it in its entirety. And if you have any questions regarding the letter, I'd be more than happy to answer them as best as I can.
Madam Chair and sir, I appreciate it very much. What I'm trying to find out is in a report that we got from LFC Analyst, it talks about racetracks have traditionally made the transfer. Is this letter saying continue making that transfer, or is it saying don't make that transfer? And I would like for that gentleman from the Gaming Control Board to answer that, please.
From our statutory authority, and I'll go ahead and quote the bold from our statute. You are hereby directed by the New Mexico Gaming Control Board to cease any such practice of deducting any fees from the 20% gaming net take that is only to be allocated to the horsemen's errands pursuant to the New Mexico Gaming Control Act, pursuant to our authority 60-2E 47 subsection E, and in conformance with the decision of the New Mexico Racing Commission dated May 20th, 2021, and set forth in the order dated June 10th, 2021, attached thereof, and that would be for the attachments.
Madam Chair and gentlemen, so as I read this, that's saying do not make that transfer to the horseman. Is that
yes,
accurate?
that is correct, sir.
And so the Gaming Control Board and the Racing Commission are of the same opinion. You do not have to transfer that fund. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir, pursuant to also our statutory authority.
Okay. And I'm confident that in further conversations and questions, we'll get the other side of the story. But I want to make sure I understand the documents before me and know what they're saying as we move forward. So
yes, sir. If you have any follow-up questions for this particular letter, I'd be more than happy to have our staff follow up and provide you with any answers that you may need.
Thank you, sir. Thank you both. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I just thank you for the time, Madam Chair.
All righty. Let's go to the next member, Representative Ezel.
Madam Chairman, thank you very much. I am a member of the New Mexico Horsemen's Association, and we were kind of told by the Racing Commission that we were not to address them. So I will probably be addressing you on all of these questions that I have, unless you direct me to do otherwise.
I think what we'll do, Representative, in that case, we will have you state your questions. We'll make sure that the staff gets those questions and can do the research. I'm not going to be the appropriate person to be able to answer those things. So go ahead and state your questions.
Madam Chair, I have been authorized by the New Mexico Racing Commission to hold a license as an owner in the state of New Mexico for the racing purposes. Right now, members of the New Mexico Horsemen's Association, I'm going to roughly say approximately just a little less than 8,000 members of the New Mexico Horsemen's Association. This includes owners and trainers and their backside personnel. I do have a voice in the Horsemen's Association, just like any other owner or trainer does, who has decided to not opt out of that association. We do used to work with the Racing Commission. They have made the recommendation that we do not have any input as far as the Horsemen's Association goes into their part of it. Madam Chair, you know as well as most of the members on this committee that I have carried quite a bit of horse racing legislation. And this is what I call my Bible, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I take great offense whenever we try to have a good product in our state. I do not want New Mexico to be at the bottom of this list, because right now, the racing industry in the state of New Mexico is the third largest contributor to the budget in our state. Last year, I have to applaud Ruidoso Downs for what they did. They ran their full meet after Sunland Park shut down with no notification to the horsemen that were back there. Sun Ray Park in Farmington, the commission allowed them to cancel their entire meet. Ruidoso did hold their meet in their entirety with spectator-free racing taking place. What did happen whenever it was stated by your analysts that the trends in racing had gone down, it was just the opposite last year, because some thoroughbred racing on the East Coast was shut down. It drew people from the eastern side of the United States to start looking at quarter horse racing, and they really got invested in it. And there was pretty good participation. That I'm proud to say that the horses from the state of New Mexico, working in conjunction with the New Mexico Breeders Association, whenever the sales go on here, it did in 2019 and 2020, the New Mexico bred horse sale and the New Mexico open horse sale did have to be moved to Guthrie, Colorado. Whenever these sales do take place here in the state of New Mexico, we have buyers from throughout the universe coming here to look at our horses, and I'm very proud of that aspect of it. Madam Chair, being a member of the legislative body, I take great exception to the statutes that all of us have worked on being violated. And that's exactly what has happened over the past year up until Sunray Park opened. The Racing Commission, along with the Gaming Control Board, said, yeah, we can open up the casinos when it's very clear in our statutes that those casinos are tied to those racetracks, and it spells out exactly in here that those casinos cannot be open unless there is a live race meet within the state of New Mexico. It's very, very clear. The New Mexico Horseman does own the rights to the simulcast signal. I want that very clear right there. I think it's very disingenuous of the Racing Commission not to recognize the New Mexico Horsemen's Association whenever it is actually those owners and those trainers and the backside personnel that do put on those races, that allow these privately owned racetracks, and that's all 5 of them in the state of New Mexico. They are privately held. Whenever they do not take into consideration the horsemen. And I took a big hit in 2019 because my horses did not have the opportunity like they did in 2019 to run. I had 5 2-year-olds that were very limited. I look at my trainers that I use and the personnel that they have working for them on the backside. And yes, I did support them. I did not bring any of my horses home. But my horses, along with lots of other horsemen, had to move their horses out of state to be able to be competitive. Madam Chair and members of the board, 2 years ago we met with the New Mexico Veterinarian Board. And this commission made the decision that there would be a veterinarian at one certain track, I'm not going to say who it was, that would administer all furosemide, which is Lacey, which is given to quarter horses generally. It is needed. AQHA, the American Quarter Horse Association, is up there working on our behalf, if you're a member of the Quarter Horse Association, because we know how important that pre-race LASIK is to horses racing at high altitudes. It's not only for New Mexico, but Colorado, Idaho, the state of Washington. Whenever you bring a horse in from Los Al, let's say, into Ruidoso, they have to get acclimated. Sometimes they bleed. This protects those horses. But whenever we have one veterinarian, and the question I posed to the New Mexico Veterinary Board was, what is your job as a veterinarian? What is the oath that you took to protect these equine athletes? And their job was, whenever we administer some sort of medication, any type of medication to any horse, any animal, we have to do a follow-up. This particular veterinarian does not do that, because I have asked my trainers, does that veterinarian come by after the race to do an inspection of my horses? I trust my trainers. I trust the veterinarian that takes care of my horses through the trainer's ability to pick out the very best veterinarian there is for the care of my equine athletes. Whenever they are talking about the federal rules that are coming down, and this may not be of importance to y'all, but there is a certain race where quarter horses do race against thoroughbreds, and that's in the 870 races. Those horses will go around 2 turns. I had a quarter horse that used to beat all the thoroughbreds pretty handily. I was very proud of her. As far as following the ARCI rules, I did implement that, and it passed unanimously. And thank you, Madam Chair, and everybody on the other side of the aisle. Whenever there was a veto come down out of the governor's office, I think all of y'all remember that were in office at that time, to follow ARCI guidelines. Those are recognized throughout the world. Madam Chairman, if a trainer is excluded from this jurisdiction, meaning New Mexico, and let's say they go to another state that is also a member of ARCI, that particular trainer cannot participate in that state as well if there has been an infraction. All I want is for the law to be followed, Madam Chair, members of the committee. That audit compliance came about because of the New Mexico Horsemen's Association. They had to go to the New Mexico Horsemen's Association staff in the Albuquerque office, and they asked for, I believe it was for 5 years worth of audits. And our staff was able to provide them with that information that they needed to the penny, because the Racing Commission had no record of it. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I understand that they did have staff that left, but there should be a backup system there. All these audit reports did come from the New Mexico Horsemen's Association. It states in our statute that each race, that a track does have to run a minimum of 17 days. The intent of that statute was to take into account the New Mexico State Fair meet. There is one racetrack that wants to squeeze racing down as small as they can so they don't have to put up with the horses there. Let's see, what else is there? Madam Chair, one other thing, and I do want to bring this up to the committee that's sitting here. As a horse owner that does race my horses, try to race my horses at New Mexico track, and as I told y'all earlier, I do have 3 racing this weekend. It might be the last time I ever get to race in the state of New Mexico after my comments here. But I have never signed anything authorizing any track to withhold funds from my account. And whenever I see where they're calling it an integrity fund, we also call it a saddling fee, $125. And whenever I read down the list of things that all this money was going for, one weekend I had 6 horses running. Now you multiply that times 125 and see what I was at. One of the things was to help defray the cost of legal fees that these tracks might be experiencing. It's not my job to help a private entity pay for their legal expenses. Madam Chairman, I am probably one of the biggest supporters of the racing industry in the state of New Mexico. But I am very adamant also about following the law, and now I am going to address the commission. These aren't suggestions at all. I believe in our equine athletes. I believe in our trainers that are trying to do the right thing. I don't mind getting beat by a faster horse, but I'll be damned if I'm going to allow a horse that's been injected with all sorts of bad stuff, I'll be polite here, and that trainer being able to walk away. I am not going to stand for that. That is putting the life of that horse at risk. It is risking the life of the jockey, and it's deceiving the betting public.
Representative Ezell, I'm going to have you wrap up because I've got a couple.
Madam Chair, I do get emotional in this. I'm very passionate about this, and I will be quiet. And like I said, if I have to start moving my horses to Oklahoma and Texas, I will be upset about that.
Thank you.
And I hope that doesn't have to happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Ezell. We've captured all of your comments, and I'd be interested then also to see what the response is going to be. But as far as I'm concerned, that this conversation was between the chairman and a member, so this was not addressed to the panel. All right, let's go to Representative Small.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, panel. Madam Chair, panel, I was very interested in Representative Crowder's questions. Very interested in picking up on the line of questioning from Representative Crowder. And I know that this will be an ongoing conversation as the question of whether or not to extend the sunset continues through the interim session and into next session, into the legislative session. It seemed to me, Madam Chair, panelists, that decoupling from thoroughbred racing is decoupling from the additional federal regulation, which seemed squarely aimed at addressing the very high rates of catastrophic breakdowns and deaths, and the very sobering fact that 80% of the tracks with the worst record, the most deaths, that seem to have maybe fed into this federal legislation right here in New Mexico, where we don't have much more than, we don't have that many tracks to begin with. if we're trying to decouple from the federal legislation that is supposed to provide more oversight and better safety, it just seems like there's a whole lot more there to dig into. But appreciating again the excellent LFC brief, the crucible that is approaching of whether or not to extend this sunset, and the clear negotiation that has to go into that. Seems like there's a whole lot more to dig into there, and that's all I'll say for now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All righty, thank you. Let's go to Representative Maestas, and then we've got two more after that. Representative Martinez and Senator Munoz, and then we're going to move on. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members. Mr. Chairman, appreciate it. And I can't claim the #1 supporter of horse racing with Representative Ezell here, but it's a fantastic part of our culture. And it must, and we have an opportunity to capture it because I think it's shrinking. The horse racing industry is shrinking nationally for whatever reason. I think hopefully with COVID, folks were in their houses so long, they just want to get out, and hopefully we can have a renaissance of the industry. But only one state, Madam Chair, has more horse tracks than we do. That's Pennsylvania with 6, and Kentucky, California, Florida, and New Mexico have 5. So we're right up there. If this were to shrink nationally, we can capture that market because tourists would love to just fly to New Mexico, see some horse racing, and spend time with their families. A couple things. One is the commission. I support extending the sunset absolutely because I don't want next July 1st not to have a commission. But we have to kind of, and I think when the bill comes through, even though we'll be amending, subsection 29 and 30, the whole bill I think will be in front of us, if I'm not mistaken, and that'll give us a chance to tweak the statute. But I think we should take a step back at some point, talk about it during the 30-day and in subsequent sessions as to why we have the structure that we currently have. Like we have a liquor director that is appointed by the governor and enforces liquor laws. We have the new cannabis division of RLD to enforce the cannabis regulations. This is a licensing entity with tremendous oversight powers that's in the Department of Tourism with a volunteer board that hires a director. And so that's why I commend you, Mr. Chairman, for volunteering to do this with all of your responsibilities in your practice and things like that is tremendous. But I think it's an outdated, antiquated system that we should rethink either during the 30 or in subsequent years. But we should definitely extend it, not extend it and look away for 5 years, but extend it, ensure that oversight continues throughout next year, and that we put some benchmarks and timelines on, the doctoring of the horses with stimulants and the injuries and deaths of the horses, because if we can decrease those, there's no reason why we can't expand racing in New Mexico. And lastly, Madam Chair, the racinos were in place to enhance the horse racing industry. And sometimes I get an impression from racinos that the horse races are like an inconvenience to their casino. That shouldn't be. The casino is there to enhance the industry, which enhances our culture, our tourism, and who we are as New Mexicans. So we can't forget that. Lastly, horse racing was in New Mexico long before other types of gaming, long before the first Native American compacts with regards to gaming, and long before the internet existed. And so now we have Indian gaming, now we have the internet, and I can't walk to the parking lot of a horse race and bet on that same horse race, but I could drive to Texas and bet on it. It just makes no sense. I know that, the current administration doesn't want to tackle sports betting, and I call it off-track betting, but sports betting and internet betting on horse racing, but it's something that we have to do because it's a market that we're not capturing now. And that will surely enhance our ability to maintain the culture of horse racing in New Mexico. Anyway, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Martinez.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and great to see you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking the helm of the commission. It's been a few months, but first time I get to see you and congratulate you.
Thank you.
The last time we had you folks in front of us, I believe was 2 years ago in Cloudcroft, and one of the comments I made then is, we've got to look at ways to modernize the industry. Like many times it seems as if we're sort of playing catch up, and so I'm wondering what y'all, and whoever wants to answer the question, but what are y'all's thoughts on, these ideas of expanding gaming at the racetracks and creating, sort of enhancing what Chairman Maestas was just talking about, right? Creating these destinations. If you're in Texas, that maybe you want to fly into Sunland Park, or if you're in Colorado, fly down to Farmington or Hobbs or wherever. Thoughts on some of those concepts to expand gaming in your facilities?
Well, I will say this. Obviously, the Indian gaming compacts may have a large influence on that are currently in place as far as what the racetracks can offer as far as different gaming. I'm someone who I think recognizes that this country has moved on to all types of gaming, sports betting. I mean, I can imagine, for example, sports betting at and I'm not speaking on behalf of the commission. I don't want you all to think that this is a position of the commission, but I personally see sports betting at the racetracks would enhance both racing and enhance gaming overall and bring in more income to the state. By the way, the state gets a piece of all gaming, and I think that would be something that New Mexico could do very well in. Obviously, we have 5 racetracks out there right now, and like you mentioned, flying to Sunland, flying to Ruidoso. I mean, look at this place. This is a gorgeous place, right? And it's going to be gorgeous tomorrow, Ruidoso Downs. And there are a lot of people that come in just to get out of the heat maybe and come up to the mountains and watch that. And I think I am someone who's personally for looking at doing other things. By no means have I taken the pulse of the rest of the commission, and that is not a position of the commission at that time. But I think that's been mentioned several times here about I can wake up in the morning and I can bet in my kitchen while having breakfast on Santa Anita, the upcoming races there, or back at Belmont, but I'm not allowed to bet on an upcoming race in Ruidoso from my kitchen in Albuquerque. And that seems antiquated, to say the least, right? You can bet on every other state racing from New Mexico, but you can't bet on a New Mexico racetrack in New Mexico. And that I think we're missing a piece of the pie there. It may be small, but still a piece of the pie that we should be able to let. And by the way, if you get, maybe you want to bet on some jockeys in New Mexico, maybe then you get to go see them. Then you go out to the racetrack. Then you go, you make it out there. So I think it builds on each other. And that's an example, I think, of technology that's out there now. The Daily Racing Form and TVG, they're out there every day. The races are live on your phone. You can bet on them anywhere in the country, except you can't bet. Right now, I can't pull it up. I can bet on Belmont, but I can't bet on Ruidoso.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's something that we really need to think about as a legislature as we look at the future of horse racing in the state. Last point, I'll take a legislator prerogative here, but the chairman's not the most famous member of his family. There's a young man out there playing ball, Alex Bregman, who, for those of you who don't know, he's an MVP caliber player. He plays for the wrong team. My hope is that he ends up in Dodger Blue at some point, but we hope he gets better soon, Mr. Chairman. I know that he's got a very, very bright future ahead of him.
Can I respond to that briefly? 15 seconds, Madam Chair. Thank you. So my son has a quad strain right now. I just want to let you know, he called me this morning and said there's a 50-50 chance that when he rehabs, it might be at the Isotopes.
Oh, beautiful.
So they'd be playing the Isotopes. So that would be fun. Anyways, he's a good New Mexico kid.
All righty. Thank you. Senator Munoz.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And, I don't know how many years I've been here, but the Racing Commission has never really figured out how to comply and how to get in line and how to fix themselves. And I think, Izzy, that's what you're going to have to do. When you guys came in, you guys kind of promised us that you were going to fix some of these problems that we had, the backlog of penalties, the lawsuits, the not regulations that you were following. So I think you guys really need to come in compliance with that before we really get into that sunset bill, or we'll have to add additional language in the sunset bill that'll make it more restrictive where you'll have to. We got to get it figured out. I completely agree on these penalties. You're not going to get blood out of a turnip. If they can't pay, they can't pay, and they're going to be on your books until you write off the bad debt and it's done and over with. So you fine them, you get the maximal penalties, you take away their licenses. At the end of the day, you're never going to collect the money because there's nothing there but an old plug that may have 3 legs by the time you get a hold of her. And so I agree with you a little bit about the online betting because TVG's right here and I have a deposit in there and you bet on horse races. But you're going to watch drugging throughout every horse race. You just seen it in the Kentucky Derby, and he finally got caught for the 5th time. And so it's going to happen, and there's no way to regulate that. There's not enough vets in the world to double check everything that everybody's doing and how they're doing it, and they're going to slip through the crack, and that's where the fine and penalties come in. But you're going to have to come into compliance. You as a commissioner are going to have to step on that ball as hard as you can and get into compliance with everything you can. A newsletter is not that hard to write. The director could write that on an extra day, and so I think you guys need to come into compliance before we really consider how we're going to fix that sunset. Otherwise, we're going to have to add more regulation and more statute to you in order for you to force you to do that, and that's really shouldn't be our job. You guys know what you need to do. The director knows what he needs to do. He knows the operational stuff, and he knows the statutes he has to abide by, and just follow the law. But we do need to change Racing New Mexico. We should probably open the casinos open wide, because now I am hearing Sandia is going to have Class 2 machines, which the state's not going to collect money on, and have alcohol on the floor. But if we want to have more racing in New Mexico, you got to have the casinos operational, because that's what pays the operational cost of the tracks. They pay the property taxes. Just take the property taxes on a racetrack, and I don't know what they are. I don't own one. But if you just take the cost to hold that for a year or 6 months or 8 months when you're not operational, the operational costs are so high, you have to have some offsetting industry to do that. And that's why they gave them the casinos. And so, if you want to have horse racing and the casinos raise the purses, that's where the horses go. That's part of the industry, and that's part of the business, and that's the way it works. And if the horsemen haven't figured that out and they let them operate because during the pandemic or open, because you have to be profitable, you have to keep everything operational. You got to figure it out, but you can't just say, just because you're open, we want you to raise purses. Well, there's another side to that business side that you have to take care of. So I think everybody needs to look at the big picture. So just make sure we get you in compliance with statute before we do the sunset. So thank you.
All righty. Thank you, Senator. I also want to thank the panel this afternoon for being here. Obviously, we'll be asking where we're at, what the status is when we get you back in front of the committee for the budget hearings. Don't know when that's scheduled yet. It'll either be October or November. And we'd certainly welcome you back, Mr. Chairman, to join the staff. Again, thank you for being here today. And I think we've got a lot of work ahead of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All righty.
Thank you.
All right, if we could, let's go ahead and bring up our next panel, which is Workforce Board Consolidation. Yolanda Montoya Cordova from the Workforce Solutions Department.
Thank you. He's Charles on that. Give somebody a bit.
I don't think about that.
Or SMB.